Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. And as we continue to deliberate the latest developments, and there are plenty of developments to deliberate indeed, it's always important to remember how everything began. 192 days ago, the Islamist terror groups from the Hamas-plagued Gaza Strip launched an onslaught on southern Israel, declaring war by perpetrating a massacre, murdering some 1,200 mostly civilians, wounding over 4,800 others, and kidnapping 246 individuals, including elderly, men, women, children, and infants. 133 of them remain in Hamas captivity to date. Let's now turn to our dear colleague, the commander of the Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense, namely Brigadier General in Reserve, Doron Gavish. General Gavish, congratulations are in order. Thankfully, the Israeli Air Force, your colleagues and others of a broader coalition under U.S. leadership has thwarted an Iranian attempt to target Israeli territory directly from Iranian territory, something that, of course, was unprecedented not only in the mere fact that it was a launch from Iranian territory, but also the scale and the capacity in the aerial defense array to withstand such an attempt.
Well, indeed, Jonathan, this was an unprecedented night. We talked so many times about the Iranian in this show, and this is the first time really that they are not hiding themselves behind the proxies. We talked about it all the time, that at least from our point of view, we called it the head of the snake, we called it the elephant in the room, but we all talked about this, that Iranians are behind all those atrocities toward Israel. And indeed, day before yesterday, we saw it during the night. The Iranian sent toward Israel, and as you said, the vast majority of those missiles, rockets, and UAVs were sent from Iranian soil. But it was a barrage of overall 170 UAVs that were sent toward Israel. There were 30 cruise missiles that were sent toward Israel, and around 120 missiles that were shot toward Israel. So a large number, everything was coordinated from their point of view. And this was from the Iranian side. On the defense side, we have to say that all the cruise missiles, all the UAVs, around the 200 numbers, the number is 200 that I just mentioned, all of them were intercepted by the Israeli forces, by the coalition forces led by the United States, and even not one of them penetrated the space of Israel. For the missiles, there were the vast majority of them were intercepted by the defense forces, air defense forces. We talked about the multi-tier defense over Israel again and again in your show, and we saw it this time. Of course, usually we see the high numbers in the Iron Dome, David Sling. This time we saw it with the Arrow 2 and the Arrow 3. And the vast majority of them were intercepted. There were few of them that fell in the ground around the Nevatim Air Force Base, but nothing significant, even nothing minor. Everything was minor, sorry, and so nothing that really changed from the Air Force point of view. The airfield was fully operated. So this was basically the hit. And we have to say that unfortunately there was a girl, a 7-year-old Bedouin girl, that was hit by this barrage of missiles. So from all of those missiles, rockets, UAVs, and so on, basically no damage in Israel. You're right that it is very impressive success. We don't recall in the world history something like this. So it is unprecedented. But we have to be very humble, and as it is our DNA to look on the mission, look on it in always in a critique way. See, even if there is 1% that we could be better at, this is what we would like to do, and this is what we are doing. And the other thing that we all understand that this is not the end of the story. This is something that it's much broader and bigger than the operational story that I just told. There is a huge strategic story. One of them, of course, is that Iran shot from its own soil, and now the world need to react to it, led by the United States, but also, of course, Israel from its point of view. The Iranians are not behind their proxies, as we said before, and trying to change the equation in the region. So, of course, there is a lot of strategic applications to it that would need to be considered once we view this vicious attack by the Iranians.
Absolutely. Well, nonetheless, it is very impressive, and I know that many across the region and beyond are looking very closely at all of Israel's achievements, identifying its qualitative military edge, which is really impressive, to say the least. Nevertheless, as you mentioned, a 10-year-old girl from the southern Bedouin tribes in Israel sustained critical injuries. Unfortunately, we pray for her speedy recovery and hope that her family also, nobody was injured, thankfully, beyond that, but it is something that needs to be highlighted. With regard to retaliation, for that I'd like to bring to the conversation Major General in Reserve Gilshon Cohen, formerly the commander of the Israeli Defense Colleges, a General Staff, Corps Commander, and Northern Corps Commander, among others. I'd like to immediately touch base on two quotes that were highlighted by the commander of the IRGC, General Salami, as well as the commander of the Iranian army, Brigadier. Both came out and said, from now on, the equation has shifted, paradigm shift that will entail a retaliatory strike by Iran for any effort by Israel to ensure that its red lines are not crossed. What is there to be read from such a statement, and to what degree does that put Israel in a point of collision for a full-out war, since Israel is, of course, intending to retaliate in force?
A great question, and before I must emphasize one definite observant and practical obligation from the Holy Scripture, a warning those who are winning not to say that all that was achieved was just due to the effort of my own hands. It is not only a commitment to God. Of course, there is salvation by God. It is a commitment to human being awareness, to take awareness about the next struggle, because everyone in the other side, including the Chinese and the Russians, are analyzing now the outcome, and they will prepare themselves to be better and to fix themselves to the Israeli and the American superiority. So we must take that great achievement as an opening for a new era of an ongoing struggle. It is basically a technological competition, not only between Israel and Iran, but also between United States, Israel in one side, and Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran on the other side. About retaliation, what was declared by the commander of the Revolutionary Guard is very, very important. Actually, he delivered again the message, what they wanted to achieve in their whole threat to Israel. They wanted to just define to the Israelis what will be considered as a red line. It means never again attack our forces in Syria. It means that for them, Syria and Iran are one united territory, including Lebanon, including Yemen. They are taking that responsibility to protect themselves in all these lands in which they are using proxies by the guidance of Revolutionary Guard commanders. And therefore, for Israel, the main challenge is not whether we will attack Iranian territory. It is important, but not now the main challenge. The main challenge is whether Israel will succeed to keep the momentum of attacking the whole effort of Iran to establish themselves in occupying Syria. Actually, they are occupying definite positions in Syria, in Haleb, in Damascus, in South Syria, including Jabal Druz, the mountain of the Druze. And the Israeli main goal, is to prevent them from opposing Syria to be another front against Israel like Hezbollah in Lebanon. This is now the main struggle. Therefore, retaliation of Israel must be judged in the consideration of the whole front. Anyhow, it wasn't a regional war, and it became more publicly declared that it is a regional war guided by Iran. But everywhere in Gaza, in Damascus, or in Lebanon, including Yemen, it is part of the whole struggle.
Indeed, General Cohen, thank you very much. I'd like to immediately also add to the conversation retired Colonel Joel Rayburn, formerly a senior director at the National Security Council in Washington for Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, and elsewhere as well, U.S. Special Envoy for Syria, and the founding director of the American Center for Levant Studies. It's good to see you, Colonel. I'd like to immediately ask you a couple of points. The first one, prior to the Iranian attack on Israel, U.S. President Joe Biden came out and said again, don't. Now, what did he mean by that? And now that, of course, we saw the Iranians follow through on their pledge to strike Israel, we heard also the deputy ambassador of the United States at the National Security Council in New York, stating if Iran or its proxies take action against the United States or further action against Israel, Iran will be held responsible. There seems to be a lot of rhetoric coming out of Washington, New York, and elsewhere, but when it comes down to things, we hear vocal messages of urging Israel to restrain itself and not necessarily holding Iran accountable in practice.
Yeah, well, Jonathan, I think what we're seeing is the logical conclusion of a U.S. policy which refrains from deterring the Iranian regime. Defense is crucial, it's needed, and what happened this weekend in terms of defense capabilities was impressive, monumental, but defense is not the same thing as deterrence. And you can't just restore deterrence, establish deterrence, maintain deterrence just through defensive means. The reason the Iranian regime was able to do things like set the conditions for October 7th to happen, or all the attacks that they've done, the aggressive policies they pursued in the region going back many years now, is that they essentially, they typically pay no price for this kind of aggression, whether that's October 7th, whether that was the attack on Abqaiq, or whether it's what they did over the weekend. And so something, in order for deterrence to be restored, for Khamenei and his regime to be deterred and refrain from doing what they demonstrated they're willing to do on Saturday, Sunday night, they have to have something that they value put at risk. They have to pay a price. That doesn't necessarily have to be done by military means. Long before now, there should have been economic pressure and political pressure to isolate the Iranian regime and to essentially halt its oil revenues, as I've said 100 times on your show. But in the absence of some significant price imposed, some significant cost imposed on the Iranian regime, they will not be deterred, and they will do exactly what Gershon just mentioned. They'll size up the defenses. They'll be emboldened to do it again. The Iranians are in an extraordinary position, I think, for a middle power in world history, where they essentially they don't have to defend anything. And they've never had to defend anything essentially significant since the end of the Iran-Iraq War. Their strategic doctrine can be entirely offensive and entirely destabilizing. They can invest all their resources, or almost all their resources, in offensive capabilities, and they don't have to worry about defending their territory. And now, as Gershon also correctly pointed out, they are asserting that Syria is essentially, they will treat Syria as Iranian sovereign territory and respond accordingly. That would be the erasure of an enormous red line, and they really, if they get away with that, if they get away with behaving that way and asserting that new red line, shift the red lines, and pay no price for it, then they'll do it again and again, and they won't just do it in Israel's direction. They will do it in the direction of the United States and all of our regional allies, as well as beyond, such as, I mean, long since they should have been, their revenues should have been disrupted, and they should have been internationally isolated because of their intervention in the Ukraine war. So they've gone beyond all reasonable bounds now. And if they don't pay a price, they will continue doing it over and over again.
One thing I think is pretty obvious, and we'll let the Iranians continue to guess when and where it's going to happen, Israel will strike at Iran in one way or another, something that has already a decision that has been taken. But I'd like to ask General Kavish, particularly, the Iranians claim that in the event that Israel, or the United States for that matter, or whatever type of coalition will emerge at the wake of this blatant attack by the Iranians, the Islamic Republic will retaliate once again tenfold, as they put it, something that, of course, will demand Israel to prepare alongside its allies and partners for the moment of truth, so to speak.
Well, you know, Jonathan, when it comes to at least on the defense part, in a minute we would say some words about the offensive part, but on the defense part, once again, we talked about it here more than once. It is not the first time that we are training together with the United States forces or ourselves against this threat. This is something that we are doing for quite long years. All the story of the multi-tier defense was built exactly for this. So it's a matter of, I would say, more than 10 to 15 years that the defense establishment here in Israel is preparing himself to this war. The concept of multi-tier defense, the concept of attack, alert, passive defense, and active defense, all those concepts, the series of Juniper Cobra exercises that have been done in the last 20 years with UCOM, and in the last 2 years of very tight cooperation with CENTCOM. So it is not a surprise for us that Iran is there. It is not a surprise for us that Iranians are brutal. By the way, we saw them in the last few months shooting missiles toward Pakistan, with all their nuclear capabilities, and other regions around. So I fully agree with Joel that the Iranians they did it, and they could do it also in the future. And the behavior of all of us to this attack would mean a lot for the future. So they do have their own plans, but we think that at least on the defense part, we are ready to all, whatever would come from there. It would be hard for them to surprise us. We saw that they couldn't do it this time. Of course, as I said before, we should stay very humble. We should prepare ourselves also to surprises. We prepare ourselves not only the attacks from Iran. We talked about multi-tier, multi-dimensional, multi-sectoral defense that is being built here in Israel. So we are looking on all of those, of course. And for the offensive capabilities, we have to remember that the Israeli forces, mainly, of course, the Air Force, but not only the Air Force, which is Israel gained capabilities in it is naval forces and others that we cannot discuss here. So Israel, if it would decide to attack, it does have the capabilities. And now that we see that there is a coalition, I think this is really a situation that as we didn't find ourselves in such a coalition against Iran, first time in the defense, but it could happen also if decided in the offense. And this is also something super important that the UK, the French, and others were part of this defense over the skies of Israel.
Indeed. Well, very important points indeed. I'd like also to highlight the fact that since the Islamic Revolution of '79, there wasn't even once that the Ayatollah regime or the Islamic Republic at large managed to come out victorious from any war, including the Iraq-Iran war, which was defeated by Iraq at the time by an army that was defeated in how many days, Colonel Rayburn? Not many, as far as I remember. But General Cohen,
about 3 weeks.
3 weeks, indeed. I asked myself how quick it would happen with the Iranians if the United States would engage it, but we'll leave hypotheticals for the future, as it seems likely that these activities may occur at some point when the Iranians lose sight of their rationale altogether. But General Cohen, I'd like to ask you particularly, when we're talking about the broad preparatory activities, obviously Israel needs to maintain focus on its own strategy and not fall into the strategy of the Iranians. And therefore, to what degree are we going to see a refocus on not only Gaza, but also on Lebanon in particular, where fighting persists?
It is clear for everybody that in Lebanon, we are not engaging only with Hezbollah. They are not only equipped and trained by Iran, they are more than just proxy of Iran. They are together in a very deep alliances, including religious alliances, as we are all consider the loyalty of Hezbollah leader Nasrallah to the regime in Tehran. But I think they made one mistake in the whole calculation of strategic situation. They took the Israeli strategic isolation, as an opportunity, not only in reality, but also as a sign of God, that isolation telling them that this is the hour to change the whole strategy to attack Israel publicly, directly from Iran. What happened with the Israeli alliances together with other countries, including American pilots, and CENTCOM led all that with British and French. They emphasized that Israel definitely is not lonely regarding the struggle against Iran. That is very, very important declaration, a manifestation of the whole situation in which they must rethink again about their strategic calculation. Not to be alone in the Middle East, it means that you are something they must consider it in a different way than the way they judge Israel before their decision to attack.
Thank you, General Cohen. And also with regard to what you mentioned earlier, I personally, as a believer, and you as well, as a man of faith, I'm sure Colonel Rayburn and General Gavish can also acknowledge the fact that the success rate in which the Israeli Air Force, in synergy with the U.S. Central Command, which led also alongside a meager British Air Force, wing to wing, so to speak, operating and shoulder to shoulder, have done so in an really exquisite manner that should be taken note of, and obviously all glory to God for the capabilities and successes that were materialized in those engagements. But nonetheless, when we're looking forward, I mean, the Iranians are looking quite clear-eyed in a realpolitik manner at a good timing from their perspective to go and sow additional divisions between Israel and the United States and other West European countries, miscalculating the depth in which it is regarded as a malign actor. Colonel Rayburn, to what degree can we see a certain shift in Western policy that would then allow to facilitate a coherent strategy that would contend with the Islamic Republic in a manner that would indeed deter it?
Well, I think that the thing to watch for is if the United States reimposes or begins to enforce again, to restart the enforcement of sanctions against Iranian regime oil revenues, financial transactions, and so on. And if the EU and the UK, if the Eurozone and the British pound zone come along with that, I think that would be very significant. And hopefully that's what President Biden is talking about when he says that his administration is going to start working with G7 counterparts on a diplomatic initiative to try to impose some costs on the Iranian regime and deter it or do what is possible in a non-military way to deter it from doing again what it did. I'd just like to point out, though, Jonathan, I mean, the supreme leader of Iran, who's about to turn 85, is a millenarian kind of deranged ideologue who I think, as he nears the end of his life, has grown increasingly reckless, and is as I say is launching essentially a strategic offensive against the United States, Israel, and our other allies in the region and beyond. While he has a regime that essentially has no real army, no real air force, and no real navy. That means they assume it's a fundamental assumption that they will never be attacked, that they never have to defend anything. Their air defense system, I think, is untested. We don't know of its efficacy, but if their air defense is as inept as they are in every other military sphere, other than drones and missiles, then their air defense probably would be insufficient to stave off even, for example, the Emirati or the Saudi Air Force. So I think that's where we are. We're dealing with a strategic leader who calls all the shots, who I think has grown increasingly reckless and assumes that he has nothing to lose.
Indeed. Not to forget, of course, the fact also that they launched more than 350 projectiles from Iran proper, many dozens or a couple dozens of those ballistic missiles failed to cross Iranian territory. They fell short, and provides also some indication to the quality of the capabilities that Iran has utilized in order to try and deter its adversaries. But we're unfortunately out of time. I'd like to immediately thank Colonel Rayburn, General Hakohen, and General Gavish for providing us much insight into the latest developments. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next update from here in Jerusalem. Shalom.